I'm Peter Travers, and I'm joined by Rick Brookhiser, who is presenting, and thank you, Rick, for presenting the inaugural Cadwallader Lecture, sponsored by the Princeton Battlefield Society. And the topic of his presentation is his book on John Trumbull, titled Glorious Lessons. Rick, it's a wonderful book about John Trumbull's paintings, and especially that series of paintings which depict the events and the heroes and the principles of the American Revolution. And it's entitled Glorious Lessons, not Glorious Paintings. What does that tell us about John Trumbull's ambition and what he was trying to do there?
Well, the phrase is from a letter that Trumbull himself wrote to Thomas Jefferson when he was 4 years into doing this series of paintings. And he explained to Jefferson that his motive for being a painter, his main motive for doing it, was to give present and future sons of misfortune glorious lessons of their rights and how they should support and assert them.
So this is when Trumbull was asked by Jefferson to be his diplomatic secretary, and he said, no, I've got this other important project to do in my life, and I want to make these paintings. Later in life, Trumbull was criticized by certain art historians who said the paintings weren't that great, and he said, you have to understand there's a difference between portrait painting and historical painting. And the difference is like almost the same between a cabinet maker and an architect. Is that where Trumbull was always thinking he was going, as being the architect, not so much the cabinet maker?
Well, he came at a period in history when historical painting was being revived and transformed. His mentor in England was Benjamin West, an American painter who'd immigrated to England, become a great success there, taught a lot of Americans who came to London to study with him. And West's innovation in history painting was to depict contemporary figures in contemporary outfits with contemporary weapons. There was a theory at the time that you didn't want such details because they might be distracting. You wanted to focus on the emotions or the nobility of the actions involved, so people should be costumed perhaps classically or some sort of generic garb. West went exactly the other way. He said, no, we want them dressed as they dressed. We want them fighting as they fought. And Trumbull took that lesson to heart. His innovation was that he didn't want to do single events or portraits, even portraits of famous and important people. He wanted to do a narrative series of paintings which would tell the story of the American Revolution. And the reason he wanted to do that was he thought the American Revolution was the most important political event in history.
Now let me talk a little bit about those paintings and his innovation in the painting. Trumbull's paintings are quite intricate. They're intricate in a couple of different ways. One are the faces of the people he portrayed. He went to an extraordinary effort to get the faces right of the actual figures who were there. How did that intricacy of painting, how was that affected by the fact that Trumbull actually had lost the vision in one eye? Did it make it more difficult? Was it better? How did that work?
Well, some people have speculated. Trumbull had an accident when he was a boy. He fell down a flight of stairs, a one-story flight of stairs in his house. And he realized later that he'd lost the sight in his left eye. He's not the only one-eyed painter in history. Camille Pissarro, the Impressionist, was also a one-eyed painter. It's possible that this affected his preference for working small. The series of paintings that Trumbull did, which hang at the Yale University Art Gallery, they're about 3 feet wide and 2 feet tall. Now, what we mostly see, what most Americans see in the rotunda of the Capitol, are large copies of 4 of those paintings. And the figures in those paintings are life-size, so the scale is much bigger. But the scale at which Trumbull preferred to work throughout his life was pretty small. And even some of his history paintings are, larger ones, are smaller than those done by Benjamin West or John Singleton Copley, who were contemporaries that he knew.
Now, one of the criticisms he sometimes got was a version of, you purport to be recording actual history, and yet there's some things that aren't quite exactly the way they were. What was Trumbull getting at? He was aware that he was painting not actual photographic representations of the events, but rather something more than that.
Well, you know, photography hasn't been invented when he's doing these. He lives long enough that he just intersects with the beginning of it, but by then he's finished this series of paintings. That criticism you mentioned that he got in his lifetime was kind of stupid for his lifetime, and it was by a guy who didn't like him and had it in for him and was paying off some old scores. Yes, a man named William Dunlap, fellow painter, less successful than Trumbull, lots of reasons for envy and resentment there. But Trumbull's contemporaries understood that history paintings were not exact depictions of one instant. They would give you an event, but they'd try to also explain it. They'd try to include the context in the event. And if that meant putting people in the painting who weren't actually at that particular spot at the time that something is happening, you did it anyway. And people accepted this as an artistic convention because it told you, well, they had some relationship to this event too, so here they also are.
Now, going back just briefly to those paintings, he has a series of 8 which tell the whole story at Yale, but the iconic 4 in the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol, are those the right ones that should have been chosen, or should there have been other ones? They're the Saratoga and Yorktown surrenders, and then the Declaration and the resignation of his commissioning. Are those the right ones?
The Declaration and the resignation are certainly the right ones to be there. President Madison asked him when they were discussing what scenes he would do in the Capitol. He suggested Bunker Hill, which was the death of General Warren at the Battle of Bunker's Hill. This was the first painting that Trumbull did. It's the first in the series. But Trumbull didn't want to do it because he wanted surrenders. He wanted American victories to be commemorated. So that's why he chose Saratoga and Yorktown. As far as I'm concerned, and most people who look at the paintings are concerned, Bunker Hill is the best painting in the series as a painting. It's the most dramatic. It's the most compelling. But Trumbull made the choice he made for other reasons, because even in the Capitol, where he's only got 4 of the 8, a story is being told. And so you've got 2 American great victories, how we won the Revolution. Here's the 2 defeated armies whose surrender we are taking. Then we also have the 2 political scenes. We have the Declaration, which in 1776 is declaring what this is all about. This is why we're fighting this war. This is why we're having this revolution. Here are our justifications, which are our principles. Then we have the resignation of Washington in December 1783. So that's 7 years later. And of course the war had been going on for over a year when the Declaration of Independence was signed. So it's a long war. It's the longest war America would fight until Vietnam. It was longer than the Civil War and our part of World War II put together. In a war that long, a lot can happen. You know, there can be obviously a lot of deaths. There can be a lot of resentments. There can be a lot of frustrations. So who knows how it's going to end? And in that resignation painting, you have Washington coming to Congress to give them his commission. In the Declaration, you have Jefferson giving Congress the Declaration. That's the theory. Here, Washington is giving his commission back. He arrives in uniform, and he has his fellow officers with him. And you think of other scenes where uniformed men appeared before legislatures or groups of politicians. Cromwell dismissing Parliament. Napoleon coming to the Directory and saying, "Okay, you're over now. Now it's going to be me."
Overawing them.
Yes,
Military
well, yes.
regalia, yes.
You're saying we've been fighting we've been bleeding, you've been talking. Well, now we are the ones who've been doing the fighting. We are now going to run things, not you guys. But that's not what's happening here. That's not this general. That's not these military men. They're not doing that.
You know, not surprisingly, at the Princeton Battlefield Society, we might suggest another possibility for those iconic paintings, in that the death of Mercer at Princeton was clearly a victory, and it's also a great painting. And Trumbull, it is said, it was his favorite painting. What do you make of that? Why was it his favorite painting? Why shouldn't that skip into one of those four? What do you think?
Well, it certainly represents an American victory. I think Trumbull liked it so much because it shows Washington in action. He has Washington in 3 other paintings, but one of them is Yorktown, so the action is over. He's resigning his commission, the whole war is over. The capture of the Hessians at Trenton, the battle has just ended. But in the Princeton painting here, he's riding to the rescue at the key moment. Things are going very badly. It looks like America might lose this clash, but Washington comes, rallies the troops from their momentary shock, and drives the British from the field. And so this is a moment of great military drama, of great personal drama. And Trumbull adored Washington. He'd been briefly an aide on his staff during the war. He got him to pose for him when he was president. As with so many other people of that generation, Washington was the iconic figure for him. So this painting shows Washington at a moment of military prowess and victory.
And also in that painting, it captures, I think, this notion that there are 2 things going on at once. One is it's a chaotic, confused, tenuous situation on the one hand, and yet Washington there seems to understand that if he can simply keep his poise, get his lines dressed, rally his troops, he has the elements of a significant victory, and it's all in that painting.
That's right. We outnumbered the British at that moment. We just had to concentrate the forces and show them that we outnumbered them. And you said there are 2 things going on, and that we shouldn't forget. There are a lot of dead men in this painting. Dead British soldiers, dead American ones. Americans being killed before our eyes. And I think this is one of the glorious lessons Trumbull tries to impart, which is revolutions are not easy. You know, history is not easy. It's struggle, it involves loss, and you just have to know that, you have to accept that, and you have to go past that and prevail.
I think just a last comment, question for you on Trumbull and his paintings. You know, the paintings, he painted them over many, many years. He touched them up. There were criticism and pot shots at their artistic quality, and maybe his abilities changed. But when you look at them all, the series of 8 in particular, and the iconic ones in the Rotunda, shouldn't we just sort of be one step above the minutia of the skill of the brushwork and so forth, and try to take in the whole picture?
I think
Isn't that the point?
One skill of his that never changed was composition, was narrative composition. So even though the detail work really does degenerate over the years, the story that he's telling, he never loses his grip on that. The other thing about the Rotunda paintings is they're huge paintings in a public space hung over our heads. So we're not up there looking at them with a magnifying glass. We're not seeing them as up close as we can see them at Yale, for instance.
Yeah.
So different standards apply.
Well, you channeled Winston Churchill, I think, in your book when you pointed out that at Princeton, as portrayed in The Death of Mercer, it wasn't the beginning of the end, but it was perhaps the end of the beginning of this revolution, showing that the Americans really amounted to a formidable force.
And that the British were not just going to roll it up colony by colony. That's what they thought they were going to do until Trenton and Princeton, and then they learned, this is going to be a longer haul.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Rick. This is terrific. I appreciate your being with the Princeton Battlefield Society.